so this flips the dialectical burden in the conversation between the debunker and the person whose beliefs are being debunked. So Vavova is telling us we should dump the no-good principle. The no-good principle is that if you have no good reason to think that your belief is true, then you cannot rationally maintain it, where a good reason is an independent reason, one that doesn't rely on the belief or any of the arguments or evidence for that belief. And so that idea is that all of your beliefs are guilty until proven innocent. And she's saying that's no good because that requires us to launch a defense for all of our beliefs that no one could give. Not even the debunker could pull off making an argument if she were to operate with this principle. So she says dump no good and instead take the principle of good. If you have good reason to think that your belief is mistaken, then you cannot rationally maintain it. So this shifts the dialectical burden. It's no longer my job to launch a defense for every single belief that I have. Rather, it's the debunker's job to show me that there's a good reason for me to think that my belief might be mistaken. My beliefs are innocent until proven guilty, not the other way around. So this shifts the burden to the debunker. So here's the good version of the error genealogical debunking argument that Vavova has articulated for us. Premise 1, influence. Irrelevant forces, that is, forces that don't bear on the truth of P, have influenced our belief that P. Mistaken. We have good reason now to think that we are mistaken about P, right? And good reason means we have a good independent reason. And I'll specify more what that means. Good. If you have good independent reason to think that your belief is mistaken, then you cannot rationally maintain it. Revision. Therefore, we cannot rationally maintain our belief that P. So you see the structure of dialectical burden has changed here. This version of the argument says the debunker has to give the debunkee good independent reason to think that his or her beliefs are mistaken. So Vavova follows this analysis up with two principles for good debunking arguments that I think are extremely helpful. So the first one is the good independent reason principle. So she says, whenever the backstory of some belief gives you reason to doubt that belief, try to establish on independent grounds that don't depend on P or on the evidence and arguments for P, whether you have good reason to think that you are mistaken. So you see, again, the dialectical burden has changed. You don't have to go out and find a good independent reason, namely a reason that doesn't depend on the belief or the evidence and arguments for that belief, to justify your belief. All you have to do is see if there's a good independent reason that shows that your belief is in fact wrong. So you're not justifying every single belief that you have, because that would lead to a kind of absurd skepticism. Instead, you're trying to see if there are good reasons to think that a specific belief might be erroneous. So the good independent reason principle is this: to the extent that you have good independent reason to think that you are mistaken with respect to some belief, then you must revise your confidence in that belief accordingly, insofar as you can. So this is a much more reasonable principle than the no good principle. The second principle that she gives us is the inverse rule of debunking. The idea here is that the potential strength of a debunking argument is inversely proportional to its ambition. The more ambitious a debunking argument is, the more beliefs the argument targets, and the more beliefs it targets, the less it leaves behind for us to do the kind of evaluative work that we need to do. So we saw that earlier with the evolutionary debunking argument. If the mere fact that evolution shaped our evaluative beliefs undermines the legitimacy of those beliefs, then we can't even make evolutionary debunking arguments, because an evolutionary debunking argument is an argument. So it depends on us taking reason seriously. It depends on us thinking that reason can get access to the way the world is so that we can know this stuff about evolution. And then it takes for granted that making arguments is a useful thing to do. So if you make an evolutionary debunking argument that targets all of our evaluative beliefs, then it basically negates itself. It undermines its own ability to even make an argument. So that, again, the debunker doesn't want skepticism. The debunker just wants to call into question a specific set of beliefs while relying on scientific evidence. So the debunker doesn't want to debunk all evaluative beliefs, because if she does that, she can't even make arguments, because arguments depend on logic and principles of reasoning and so forth. And if she's debunked all categories of the mind, she has debunked her very ability to make arguments. So the more ambitious the evolutionary debunking argument is, the weaker it is.